My fiancée called me, just a dear friend, in front of 280 guests. So I quietly pulled $920,000 her campaign. Her poll numbers hit 0. I found real love and move on with another one. I, 32M, own a mid-sized commercial real estate development firm. I build things from the ground up, and I understand the value of a solid foundation. For years ago, I thought I had found that exact foundation with my fiancée, who was 30 at the time. She was a brilliant, fiercely ambitious assistant district attorney, with her eyes set firmly on the state senate. I loved her drive, I loved her vision for our city, and I loved her enough to bankroll the most expensive, aggressive political campaign this district had ever seen. I am sharing this today because the election was officially certified last week. The Federal Election Commission just handed down their final indictments, and the silence in my house is finally peaceful. I didn't just break off an engagement. I legally and methodically dismantled her entire life, and I did it without ever raising my voice. To understand the sheer magnitude of the collapse, you have to understand the setup. The state senate race in our district is notoriously brutal. My fiancée was running against a 3-term incumbent who had deep pockets and a lot of establishment backing. To win, she needed massive visibility. Now, as a candidate, the law heavily restricts how much money an individual can give directly to a campaign committee. The cap is just a few $1,000s, which was absolutely not going to buy the primetime television airtime. She needed to compete. So I did what wealthy political backers do. I legally established an independent expenditure-only political committee, a super PAC. I named it Citizens for a Better Tomorrow, and I personally seeded it with $920,000 of my own money. By law, a super PAC can raise and spend unlimited amounts of money to advocate for a candidate, but absolutely cannot coordinate directly with a candidate or her official campaign staff. My attorney ran the PAC, and I was the sole donor. The entire strategy was built around a massive, overwhelming television and digital ad blitz that was scheduled to flood the local airwaves exactly 21 days before the election, drowning out her opponent entirely right when voters were making their final decisions. My fiancée knew the PAC existed. She knew I funded it. She knew the general timeline because it is standard political strategy, even if we legally could not discuss the specific operational details at the dinner table. She felt completely entitled to that money. She treated my wealth as her personal war chest, a convenient stepping stone for her to build a political dynasty. The turning point happened on a Friday night, exactly 3 weeks before Election Day. It was her flagship fundraising gala. I paid for the venue, which was a stunning historic ballroom downtown. I paid for the premium catering, the top-shelf open bar, and the string quartet playing up in the gallery. 280 guests were in attendance. We are talking mayors from neighboring towns, powerful union leaders, local celebrities, and wealthy socialites. I was standing near the back of the room near the heavy mahogany doors, nursing a glass of sparkling water, just watching her work the room. She was wearing a stunning emerald dress, and she looked like a future governor. Then she took the stage for her keynote speech. She thanked the major donors by name. She thanked her campaign manager, a slick, fast-talking political operative from out of state she had hired 6 months prior. She talked endlessly about family values, community transparency, and loyalty. Then she gestured toward the back of the room where I was standing. The spotlight shifted, blinding me for a split second. And I want to give a special acknowledgement to someone who's been absolutely instrumental in organizing tonight, my fiancée said, smiling warmly into the microphone. My dear friend, whose support means the world to our community. Thank you for being such a wonderful friend. The crowd offered polite, mild round of applause. I stood completely still. Did she just call me her dear friend? We had been engaged for 8 months. We lived together. I was paying the massive mortgage on our downtown penthouse. I funded the very microphone she was speaking into. I squinted, looking closely at her left hand as she gripped the edges of the wooden podium. The diamond ring I gave her, a custom 3-carat piece that took me months to design, was gone. Her finger was completely bare. I didn't make a scene. I smiled, nodded to the crowd to acknowledge the applause, and stepped back into the shadows. My mind was racing, trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe she took it off to wash her hands and forgot to put it back on. Maybe her political consultants told her that flaunting an expensive engagement to a wealthy real estate developer made her look out of touch with working-class voters. But calling me a dear friend, that was a deliberate choice of words. That was a public demotion broadcast to the most powerful people in the state. When the speech ended and the music resumed, I quietly walked down the side hallway toward the VIP green room to wait for her and ask her about it privately. The heavy door was slightly ajar. I stopped dead in my tracks when I heard voices inside. It was my fiancée and her campaign manager. "You handled the developer perfectly," the campaign manager was saying. His voice was low, intimate, and entirely too close to her. "I had to," she replied. She sounded entirely casual, almost bored, a tone I had never heard her use. The mayor's faction is incredibly anti-development right now. If they see a massive rock on my finger tying me to the biggest commercial landlord in the county, they will pull their endorsement tomorrow morning. Besides, he is completely clueless. He just smiles at the cameras and writes the checks. I heard the sound of ice clinking in a glass. "When are you going to finally cut him loose?" the campaign manager asked. "I am getting really tired of pretending we are just strategizing when I come over to the apartment for late-night meetings." My chest tightened so hard it physically hurt, but my breathing remained slow and steady. I didn't make a sound. "After the swearing-in ceremony," she said softly. "The PAC money legally clears the media buyers on Monday morning for the final 3-week ad blitz. Once those broadcasting contracts are locked in and the ads are running, we don't need to humor him anymore. I will move my things out the day after the election. Come here." I leaned slightly to look through the crack in the door hinges. The campaign manager had his hands on her waist. She leaned in and they kissed. It wasn't a quick, secretive peck. It was deep, familiar, and practiced. They had been doing this for a while. I stepped back from the door. I walked down the long hallway, exited to the kitchen loading dock to avoid the crowd, and got into my car. I didn't speed. I didn't punch the steering wheel. I drove the exact speed limit all the way back to my downtown office. The betrayal was heavy, but the sheer entitlement is what brought everything into sharp, absolute focus. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was actively using my love, my trust, and my personal wealth to finance a lucrative political career she planned to share with a man she was sleeping with. She believed she could string me along until the exact moment my money was legally committed to her success, and then discard me like a piece of garbage once she had the power she craved. I sat at my desk in the dark and looked at the clock on the wall. It was 10:30 p.m. on a Friday. The media buys for the $920,000 ad blitz were scheduled to be finalized and executed by the Super PAC's agency at 9 a.m. sharp on Monday. I picked up my cell phone and called my attorney. He was at home, probably asleep, but he answered on the second ring. "We need to dissolve Citizens for a better tomorrow," I said, staring out the massive window at the city lights. "I want the entire entity liquidated and closed immediately." My attorney was silent for a long moment. "The media buys execute on Monday morning. If we terminate the PAC right now, we have to cancel all the broadcast contracts. Her campaign will have absolutely zero air cover for the last 3 weeks of the race. The incumbent will slaughter her. She will be a sitting duck." "That is exactly the point," I said, my voice completely flat. "Draft the Federal Election Commission termination reports. Instruct the media agency to halt all operations immediately. I want the remaining funds refunded entirely to the original donor, which is me." "Understood," he said. He didn't ask any personal questions. He bills by the hour, and he knows my tone when my mind is made up. It will be done by morning. I drove back to our shared penthouse. I went to our master bedroom and gathered everything that belonged to her: clothes, shoes, her expensive jewelry, her endless boxes of campaign files and voter data. I packed them methodically into a dozen large suitcases and heavy cardboard boxes. I moved every single item into the guest bedroom and locked the door. Then I packed one small overnight bag for myself and booked a suite at a luxury hotel across town. She came home around 2 a.m. I was sitting on the living room sofa, waiting in the dark. She flipped on the light switch, jumped slightly when she saw me sitting there, and quickly pasted on a sweet, tired smile. "There you are. Why did you leave the gala so early? Everyone was asking for you. I missed you. Where's your ring?" I asked quietly, not moving. She looked down at her hand, feigning perfect surprise. "Oh!" I took it off in the restroom to wash my hands and left in my purse. I was so busy networking and shaking hands, I completely forgot to put it back on. You know how crazy these events get. I was standing outside the green room. I said, the words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Her fake smile faltered. The color completely drained from her face, leaving her looking sickly pale. For a few agonizing seconds, the silence in the room was deafening. I could see the gears turn behind her eyes as she frantically calculated, trying to figure out exactly how much I had heard and how she could spin it. "I heard you talking to your campaign manager," I continued, keeping my voice completely devoid of any emotion. "I heard you explain how you are hiding our relationship to secure political endorsements. I heard you say you are leaving me the day after the election once my money is spent. And I saw you kiss him." She didn't cry. She didn't drop to her knees and apologize. The sweet, loving mask she had worn for 4 years melted off entirely, revealing something incredibly cold, calculating, and deeply arrogant underneath. "So, what?" she said, crossing her arms defensively and lifting her chin. "You want an apology? Fine. I am sorry you had to find out like that. But let us be completely realistic here for a second. You are a real estate guy. I am going to be a state senator. My image has to be carefully managed. He understands the political landscape. You just understand pouring concrete and cashing rent checks." I simply stared at her. The sheer narcissism was almost fascinating to witness in real time. "Look," she sighed, taking a step toward me and softening her voice, trying a different tactic. "We can figure the personal stuff out later. You made a commitment to this campaign. The city needs this win. Let us just get through the next 3 weeks. Let the PAC ads do their job on Monday. And we can go to couples counseling after the swearing-in ceremony. I still care about you." She actually believed I would still fund her. She thought I was that weak. "There are no PAC ads," I said calmly, leaning back into the sofa. "I called my attorney 2 hours ago. Citizens for a Better Tomorrow is being legally dissolved as we speak. The media contracts are entirely canceled. The funds are returning to my private bank accounts. Your airwaves are going to be completely silent for the rest of the race." Her eyes went wide. The arrogant posture shattered instantly, replaced by pure, unadulterated panic. "You cannot do that," she screamed, dropping all pretense of composure and taking a step toward me. "Those ads are the entire strategy. The incumbent is dropping $1 million in negative attack ads on Monday morning. If we do not counter them with the PAC money, I am completely finished. My poll numbers will hit 0. That sounds like a severe logistical problem for your campaign manager to solve," I said, standing up and grabbing my overnight bag from the floor. "Your things are boxed up in the guest room. I expect you completely moved out of my property by Sunday evening. If you are not gone, I will have the building management remove your belongings to the curb." I walked past her toward the front door. She grabbed my arm, digging her manicured nails into my jacket sleeve. "If you pull that money," she hissed, her voice trembling with absolute rage, "I will destroy you. I will go to the press tomorrow morning. I will tell them you tried to bribe me for favorable zoning laws. I will tell them you were controlling, abusive, and that you shut down the PAC because I bravely refused to be politically corrupt. I will completely ruin your company." I looked down at her hand, grabbing my arm, then looked directly into her eyes. "Do whatever you feel you need to do," I said quietly, "but know that I am fully prepared for a war you cannot afford." I pulled my arm away and walked out the door, leaving her screaming my name in the hallway. The weekend was quiet. I stayed in my hotel suite, ordered room service, and ignored the dozens of frantic texts and voicemails she left me. On Monday morning, the political landscape shifted violently, just as she predicted. The incumbent state senator unleashed a massive, highly coordinated attack ad campaign. Television, radio, unskippable digital ads on every major social media platform. They hammered her mercilessly on her lack of experience, her vague policy stances, and her aggressive, unchecked ambition. According to her internal strategy, this was the exact moment my super PAC was supposed to counterstrike, with an overwhelming flood of positive, visionary advertisements to drown out the negativity and make her look like a hero. Instead, there was nothing. Absolute, deafening silence. By Tuesday, her campaign was in a total freefall. The local political blogs and newspapers were buzzing, wondering where her promised war chest was. Donors were panicking. Without the air cover to defend her reputation, her polling numbers started to tank instantly. That is, when she and her campaign manager decided to play dirty. They realized they could not legally force me to reopen the super PAC. So they tried to create a massive scandal to force me to settle and hand over cash quietly just to make it go away. On Wednesday morning, a highly speculative, anonymously sourced blind item article appeared on a prominent local political blog. It heavily implied that a prominent local commercial developer had tried to extort a rising female political star for zoning favors and was now punishing her financially for having strict ethical boundaries. It was clearly her doing. She was laying the groundwork to publicly accuse me and ruin my business reputation. She also attempted a ridiculous legal maneuver. She hired an aggressive, bottom-feeding family law attorney who filed an emergency injunction in civil court, attempting to freeze my personal bank accounts. Her lawyer argued that because we were engaged and living together, my personal wealth constituted coming-led assets, and she was entitled to a significant portion of withdrawn PAC funds to maintain her standard of living. It was a desperate, legally frivolous move. We were not married. There is no common law marriage in our state. Every single asset I owned was strictly in my name, purchased well before I even met her. My attorney went to the emergency hearing, calmly presented the property deeds and bank account origins to the judge, and the judge threw her injunction out in less than 10 minutes, sternly warning her lawyer against filing garbage motions in his courtroom. But I knew she wouldn't stop. She felt entitled to victory, and she was entirely willing to burn me to the ground to get it. I needed a permanent solution. I needed leverage that she could not spin to the media. I hired a highly specialized, incredibly expensive private investigator. I told him to look deeply into the campaign manager, not his personal life, but his professional history and his financial footprint. I figured if he was arrogant enough to sleep with his candidate in a public building during a gala, he was likely arrogant in his accounting practices as well. It took the investigator exactly 4 days to find the rot. The campaign manager was embezzling from her campaign. The investigator legally pulled the campaign's publicly mandated financial disclosure forms from the state registry. He cross-referenced the massive expenditure reports with state business filings. The campaign manager had set up a completely anonymous shell LLC under a registered agent in a neighboring state. Over the last 6 months, he had been billing my ex-fiancée's campaign thousands of dollars a week for vague digital consulting services and voter outreach software. The LLC had no website, no employees, and absolutely no actual software. He was simply generating fake invoices and funneling the campaign's small donor cash directly into his own pockets. My ex had no idea. She trusted him blindly with the finances because she was sleeping with him. I took the thick dossier of evidence from the investigator, made 2 copies, and waited for the perfect moment to drop the hammer. The climax of the election was a final town hall debate, broadcast live on a local news network, just 5 days before the voters went to the polls. The venue was a large high school auditorium downtown, and the public was allowed to attend. I bought a ticket. I walked into the auditorium 15 minutes before the live broadcast started, and took a seat right in the second row, directly in the line of sight of her wooden podium. She walked onto the stage. She looked exhausted. The sheer lack of advertising had brutalized her standing in the community, and the stress of the collapsing campaign was highly visible on her face. She arranged her notes, looked up at the audience, and froze. She saw me. She physically stumbled backwards, bumping hard into her own chair. She recovered quickly, but the microphone caught her sharp gasp of air. The debate began. It was an absolute massacre. The incumbent, flush with cash and riding high in the polls, dismantled her on every single policy issue. She was completely distracted. She kept glancing down at me in the second row. She stumbled over her prepared words. She lost her train of thought repeatedly. Halfway through the debate, the moderator turned to the critical topic of campaign finance and transparency. To the challenger, the moderator said, reading from a blue card, "Your campaign promised a massive final media push, yet your presence has completely vanished in these critical final weeks. Furthermore, questions have recently been raised regarding your campaign's expenditure reports. Can you speak directly to your financial management skills and assure the voters their donations are being used properly?" She gripped the podium so hard her knuckles turned white. She looked down at me, her eyes flashing with absolute venomous hatred, fully intending to launch into a rehearsed lie about my extortion to play the victim on live television. She took a deep breath to speak. Before she could form a single word, the news broke. Earlier that afternoon, I had anonymously sent the entire dossier of the campaign manager's embezzlement to the lead investigative journalist at the exact same news network hosting the debate. I included the LLC filings, the wire transfer receipts, and the glaring campaign disclosure anomalies. The moderator paused, touching his earpiece. The control room was speaking to him urgently. We are actually getting breaking news right now," the moderator said, his voice changing tone completely. He looked directly at my ex. "Our newsroom has just verified legal documents showing that your primary campaign manager has been actively funneling campaign donations into a fraudulent shell corporation for the last 6 months. Are you aware that your campaign is currently the victim of massive financial fraud orchestrated by your own senior staff?" The silence in the auditorium was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. Her jaw dropped. She looked frantically to the side of the stage where the campaign manager usually stood in the wings. He wasn't there. Someone in the back of the room yelled. "He left." I just saw him run out the back doors into the parking lot. The campaign manager, who was monitoring the social media feeds from the wings, had seen the story break online a few minutes prior and immediately bolted from the building to save himself. She looked back at the moderator, completely paralyzed. Millions of people across the state were watching her on live television. The strong, visionary leader she portrayed herself to be evaporated instantly. She looked small, terrified, and utterly incompetent. I have no knowledge of that," she stammered into the microphone, her voice shaking uncontrollably. "I demand a recess. I need to speak to my legal team." The debate essentially ended right there in total chaos. The broadcast abruptly cut to commercial. The audience began murmuring loudly, pointing at the stage. She rushed off, her face completely pale. I stood up, buttoned my suit jacket, and walked out of the auditorium. The cool night air felt absolutely incredible. The legal and political fallout was rapid and total. On Election Day, she received less than 12% of the vote. It was a historic, humiliating defeat for a challenger in this district. But losing the election was only the very beginning of her problems. The Federal Election Commission immediately opened a massive, sweeping investigation into the campaign's finances. As the candidate, she was the ultimate legal signatory on all the fraudulent expenditure reports, even though she didn't orchestrate the actual embezzlement. Her gross negligence and her signature on the official documents made her legally culpable for the massive discrepancies. The campaign manager turned on her instantly. To secure a lighter sentence for himself for wire fraud, he claimed she knew all about the Shell LLC and authorized the fake payments to hide campaign debt. It was a complete lie. But they were two liars trapped in an interrogation room together, fighting for their own survival. She was left with massive, crippling legal fees to defend herself against the federal government. Because her political career was officially toxic waste and her name was a liability, her prestigious law firm quietly let her go. She had no income, no future in politics, and zero credibility in the legal community. 2 months after the election, I was sitting in my office reviewing blueprints when my assistant told me someone was downstairs in the lobby begging to see me. It was her. I told security to allow her up. I wanted to see the final result of my work. She walked in, looking completely hollowed out. She wasn't wearing designer clothes anymore. She looked exhausted and genuinely terrified. "Please," she said, her voice cracking as she stood near the door. "I am drowning. The legal fees are eating everything I have left. The FEC is threatening massive financial penalties. He lied about me to the feds. You know I didn't steal that money. You know I am not a criminal. I know you are not a thief, I said calmly, leaning back in my leather chair. But you are a liar, and you are incredibly entitled. I made a massive mistake, she cried, tears streaming down her face. I got caught up in the power. The politics blinded me to what was important. But I loved you. I really did. No, you didn't. I corrected her softly, not feeling an ounce of pity. You loved the foundation I provided. You loved the money. And when you thought you didn't need the foundation anymore, you tried to demolish it. I have nothing, she whispered, looking at the floor. You have exactly what you earned. I replied, I suggest you hire a very good public defender. I pressed the intercom button on my desk and asked security to come up and escort her out. She didn't fight. She didn't scream like she did at the apartment. She just turned around and walked away, finally realizing that she had held all the winning cards and actively chose to set the entire deck on fire out of pure greed. A year has passed since that day. My real estate business is thriving and the city is growing. But more importantly, I found someone real. Remember the investigative journalist I anonymously sent the embezzlement dossier to? She reached out a few weeks after the election to ask a few clarifying questions about commercial real estate zoning for a completely different story she was working on. We met for coffee to discuss it. We ended up talking for 3 hours. She is incredibly sharp, fiercely independent, and possesses a level of integrity I honestly didn't know existed anymore. We have been together for 6 months now. There are no secrets, no hidden agendas, and absolutely no politics allowed in our home. It is strange how life corrects itself when you let it. Sometimes, the absolute worst betrayals are just violent course corrections, forcing you off a disastrous path and pointing you toward exactly where you need to be. I lost a significant amount of time and trust, but I gained my absolute freedom. Watching an entitled manipulator completely engineer her own public destruction was worth every single second of the stress. If you enjoyed watching a corrupt political campaign violently implode on live television, hit that subscribe button. It's totally free, unlike the massive legal fees my ex is still paying off to the federal government.